Tonight, the death toll is climbing after a UPS cargo plane crashed during takeoff in Louisville, Kentucky, more than 24 hours ago.
Officials now confirm at least 12 people have died, including a child.
A blinding flash tore through the afternoon sky in Kentucky, followed by a wave of fire that painted the sky orange. People in Louisville stepped outside, thinking a building had exploded, but what they saw was far worse. A giant cargo jet was falling back to Earth, its body already engulfed in flames, leaving behind a trail of sparks across the dark horizon. For a few seconds, the world froze. Then came the realization. This wasn't a bomb or a storm, it was a plane that had lifted off just moments earlier. No distress call, no warning, only silence before impact. As investigators rushed to the scene, one question echoed across the city. How could a plane built to survive almost anything fall so fast? That afternoon, Louisville, Kentucky was still bustling with daily life. At the center of the quiet airport stood a silver MD-11 cargo jet, waiting to begin its long 8-hour journey across the Pacific to Honolulu. Inside the cockpit, 3 experienced pilots prepared for departure. They checked the instruments, cross-verified the charts, and listened to the calm voices from the control tower. Nothing seemed unusual. Weather was clear, visibility perfect, and the runway lights stretched endlessly ahead like a promise. The aircraft, owned by UPS, carried thousands of packages and over 34,000 gallons of jet fuel. Fully loaded, it weighed more than 500,000 pounds, a flying giant built to handle the most demanding routes. For years, this type of jet had served faithfully, crossing oceans, facing storms, and always returning home. To anyone watching from the terminal, the scene was ordinary, a routine flight, nothing more. But in aviation, routine can turn dangerous in the blink of an eye. As the engines roared to life and the aircraft began its roll down the runway, no one realized they were witnessing the start of a tragedy that would rewrite the rules of safety forever. What could possibly go wrong in the most controlled moment of flight? The runway stretched ahead like a glowing line through the dark. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Every gauge, every sound, every second mattered. The MD-11 began to accelerate, its engines pushing more than 500,000 pounds of weight forward with unstoppable force. The pilots watched the airspeed indicator climb. They were waiting for a single number that would decide everything V1. When that moment arrived, the captain's voice broke through the roar, V1. From that point on, there was no turning back. V1 is the moment when a pilot must commit to takeoff, even if something goes wrong. Below that speed, you can still abort. Beyond it, you must fly. If an engine fails after V1, there is not enough runway to stop. Every pilot trains for this scenario countless times in simulators, but few ever live it in real life. Seconds later came the next call. Rotate. The captain gently pulled the control column and the aircraft's nose lifted. The lights of the runway tilted away as the heavy jet struggled to rise. For a moment, it seemed the flight was safe, but then sparks appeared under the left wing. Flames shot backward, small at first, then spreading fast across the surface. The cockpit filled with warning lights. The alarm sounded, and the smell of smoke began to creep in. The pilots had already passed V1 too fast to stop, too heavy to climb easily. Instinct replaced procedure. From the outside, the aircraft looked uneven, fighting to gain altitude as one side burned. It wasn't climbing normally. It was limping through the air. The left engine was dying, and the others were struggling to carry the load. 3 engines were meant to guarantee safety, but now only 2 remained, and even they were under stress. The MD-11 wobbled, its nose shaking as the pilots tried to keep control. Something deep inside the aircraft had failed in a way no one expected. Why did the fire start at that exact moment, and what else was breaking apart beneath the flames? The first eyewitness video appeared online less than an hour after the crash. It showed a burning jet climbing weakly into the sky, one wing already glowing orange. The flames weren't small or contained, they were wild, alive, and spreading fast. For a moment, it looked as if the plane was flying with half of its body on fire. From a distance, people thought it was a flare or a meteor. Only when the aircraft vanished behind the trees did they realize it was something far worse. Local CCTV footage confirmed it. The MD-11 had lifted barely above the ground, its left engine completely engulfed. The fire burned through the wing's metal skin, spilling fuel in bright streaks across the night. Experts reviewing the footage noticed something disturbing. The flames weren't reacting like a normal engine fire. They didn't flicker or fade. They expanded with steady force, as if the engine had ruptured from within. That meant a possible explosion inside the turbine itself, something powerful enough to tear through titanium. In aviation, fires are designed to be contained by special shielding, but this one escaped in seconds. The burning fuel began feeding on itself, creating what pilots call a fire loop, a chain reaction that grows hotter the longer it burns. At this point, the aircraft was still trying to climb, fighting both gravity and its own destruction. The captain's voice would have been calm but urgent, calling for fire suppression systems. Yet those systems depend on an intact engine, and this one may have already broken apart. The heat wave likely damaged nearby controls, cutting off hydraulic lines that controlled the left wing's movement. By the time the plane reached the end of the runway, it was already crippled. Witnesses reported seeing it wobble, tilt to the left, and then vanish behind a row of warehouses. The fire, unstoppable now, consumed what little lift remained. How could a jet with such advanced safety systems lose control so fast, and what exactly caused an engine built for endurance to burn from the inside out? When investigators reached the crash site at sunrise, they expected to find the wreckage in one area. Instead, the scene stretched across almost a mile. The first thing they discovered wasn't part of the fuselage, it was an engine lying hundreds of feet before the main debris. That single clue changed everything. The left engine, known as engine number 1, had separated from the wing during takeoff. It didn't fall off after impact, it broke away in the air. The force of that detachment ripped open fuel lines and tore part of the wing apart, sending fragments flying across the runway. Those fragments acted like shrapnel, slicing through the air with incredible speed. Experts soon realized one of those fragments had struck the opposite side of the plane. Evidence from CCTV and radar showed bright flashes on the right wing, the same moment the fire expanded. Engineers identified those flashes as a compressor stall, a sudden failure inside the right engine caused by damage or airflow disruption. That meant the aircraft lost power on 2 sides almost at once. The center engine, mounted at the tail, was still running, but it couldn't carry the weight alone. With one engine gone and another crippled, the jet had less than half the thrust it needed to climb. It was a miracle it even got off the ground. Aviation analysts compared the data to older incidents involving similar aircraft. In one historic case, a DC-10 suffered a nearly identical failure when its pylon broke, causing the engine to detach mid-flight. That event changed design standards for years, but some of those lessons were never fully applied to the MD-11. The more investigators examined the pieces, the clearer it became that this was not random. Something inside the aircraft had caused a chain reaction, a design flaw or mechanical weakness that turned one engine failure into two. If one engine could destroy another in seconds, what other weaknesses might still be hiding in the skies above us? At 184 knots, the MD-11 was barely airborne. The flames had already consumed the left side, and the right engine was faltering. From the ground, the jet looked like a wounded bird struggling against the inevitable. Witnesses later described it as flying sideways, trying to stay in the air when physics had already decided otherwise. The pilots inside fought with every ounce of skill they had. Warning alarms screamed, and the cockpit glowed red as systems failed one by one. The captain called for maximum thrust, but there was nothing left to give. The aircraft shuddered violently, the nose pitching up and down as they tried to correct the roll. For a moment, it seemed the jet might recover, but then the left wing dipped too far. The MD-11 clipped a power line before striking the top of a warehouse. Sparks exploded into the sky as metal tore apart, scattering debris across the industrial park. Fuel tanks ruptured instantly, creating a massive orange fireball that could be seen miles away. The impact wave shattered windows and set off car alarms across Louisville. Inside that inferno, 3 pilots were still strapped in their seats, powerless to stop the chaos. The aircraft's momentum carried it almost a mile further, plowing through buildings and vehicles before finally collapsing into silence. In those final seconds, there was no time for words, only instinct and courage. When firefighters arrived, they found what looked like a wall of fire stretching along the ground. It took nearly 4 hours to control the blaze. The wreckage was unrecognizable, melted into the asphalt. Only the scattered fragments of the tail proved what kind of aircraft it had once been. As dawn broke, smoke still hung in the air, and the city began to grasp the scale of what had happened. The takeoff that should have lasted less than a minute had become a disaster that would haunt aviation forever. How can an aircraft designed to be resilient collapse completely within minutes of flight? The morning after the crash, the site looked more like a battlefield than an airport. Investigators from the NTSB arrived in protective suits, stepping carefully through smoking debris. Every piece of metal, every bolt, every shard of wire could tell part of the story. Their mission was clear: to find out why one of the safest aircraft ever built had fallen apart seconds after takeoff. The first major discovery came from the engine remains scattered nearly a mile before the main wreckage. Engineers confirmed that the left engine had separated mid-air. The attachment points, called pylons, showed signs of fatigue and cracking. Some bolts were stretched beyond their limit, a clue that stress had been building for a long time. This was not a sudden failure. It was a mechanical problem waiting to happen. Further analysis revealed something even more alarming. Maintenance logs showed that the aircraft had undergone recent work on its left pylon assembly only weeks before the crash. A repair that was meant to strengthen the structure might have introduced a hidden weakness. Metallurgical tests found microfractures inside the mount, tiny cracks invisible to the naked eye but deadly under the stress of takeoff. Investigators also discovered that this same model, the MD-11, shared components with the older DC-10, a jet infamous for engine detachment accidents in the 1970s. Many experts had warned that the MD-11 inherited some of its design flaws, including its complex engine mount system. Over time, those warnings had been ignored in favor of faster service and lower maintenance costs. After reconstructing the inside of the hangar, the NTSB released its final report. The official cause was determined to be structural failure of the engine mast due to metal fatigue. But between the lines, the message was clear. This was not only a technical failure, but a human one. If an aircraft can carry a hidden flaw for decades before revealing it in one fiery moment, what other designs in our skies might be carrying the same silent threat? The fireball over Louisville became more than a tragedy. It became a lesson written in flame. It reminded the world that even the most advanced machines can fail if small flaws go unseen. Behind every flight lies a balance between trust and risk, between human precision and mechanical imperfection. For the families, the loss will never fade, but for aviation, it was a turning point that changed how engineers build and how pilots fly. The sky remains a place of wonder, but also one of consequence. What do you think was this fate, or a failure we simply refuse to see coming?